NCRP Productions presents the Fireside Chat Series. Welcome back to another Fireside Chat. This is Barry.
Hey everyone, it's Pedro.
And tonight, we're getting together for the first time in a couple months, I think.
Yeah, it's been a little while since we've done a Fireside. But that just means we built up a few things that kind of we could talk about.
Absolutely. Well, so what's going on in life for you right now?
Yeah, right now, life's going pretty good. Just got a new position at work, which turned out great.
Congratulations.
Having a great time. Just kind of, new job is to go and help out. You know, if any problems show up, I'm the fixer guy for it. So
Okay.
Huge stuff, things like that. Not necessarily IT, but very specialized IT maybe.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
For the store, thank God, it's starting to turn back around. We're
Nice.
slightly coming out of COVID. We're not able to open up yet for a lot of in-store play, but a little bit. And so we'll see what happens going forward.
Yeah, picking up though, that's good.
That's going to kind of lead us, our topic tonight, when we have been building up, getting things ready, our topic for tonight is
Shadowrun.
Shadowrun. Yeah. So what's your history with Shadowrun? What do you know about the game?
My history is pretty much nothing. So I remember years back, it was 5th edition was out when I really just heard about it. And so 5th edition, I had heard a few things of it being like really in depth, like very in depth, and I've even looked at the book itself, and I remember it being huge. So
Yep.
I heard a few stories. Since we've been kind of discussing it, I realized the adventure that I had heard about is kind of the one that starts a lot of games off. Something in a diner. What diner?
It's called the Stuffer Shack.
So after hearing that term and hearing about it, I was like, oh, I think that's a game I heard about, and I just the memory I have of somebody talking about them trying to like kind of stealth, talk their way through, and then one guy coming in with a grenade when it wasn't working, and then just
boy.
messing. Yeah. So then I remember trying to look at the game, and looking at 5th edition, I had no idea anything about it. You look at the beginning, it's like, oh, here's the list of slang. So just all these slang words, and I'm like, okay. And I actually, before now, I've never played in the cyberpunk realm in a game, really.
So any of the cyberpunk genre you haven't done anything with?
I can't really think of one. No.
Okay.
So this was a really new thing for me. And then I remember looking at the whole Matrix and seeing that there's like basically a whole book just for dealing with the Matrix in 5th edition in the core rule book. So I was like, you know what? I'm probably not going to run this. And I also remember there being something about, not just playing on game night, but then the rest of the week, if I want to do this in game. And I remember I remember being told they had rules for like, doing email chains or like talking about what you're going to do in the middle of between runs or something like that.
Wow.
I don't know, or maybe that was just a group, but I remember being real in depth, and I was like, I'm barely a dungeon master in D&D right now. I can't do 5th. Cyberpunk Shadowrun. So yeah.
Well, Shadowrun, I've got a long history with it.
Yeah, you've mentioned a little bit over the years.
Yeah,
but
there's bits. I was looking back, and I remember I was at the Gen Con in 1989 where it was brought out and released. And I remember that Gen Con. Now, I can't tell you how many copies. The original company was FOSSA, and they're no longer with us. Many pieces of them went to many other companies. Currently, Catalyst Game Labs are the ones that owned and have a lot of the employees, but are the ones that own the remainders of the now defunct FOSSA. But I don't know how many copies of the first edition they printed. My memory was they completely sold out, and in my head, at that point, I was editor for Space Gamer magazine, and in my head, I kind of remember them saying that they had brought 5,000 copies of the game book. Now, I could be wrong, but I remember, even if it wasn't 5,000, it was that level of impact. The other thing with Shadowrun that was interesting is the way it was kind of sold to us, at least at that time. I think it's gotten a life of its own now. But the way it was sold to us at that time was science fiction D&D. So you still had, as we have today, a strong push for people playing Dungeons and Dragons. And this was a step away from it, but having all the standard fantasy characters. You had elves, you had dwarves, you had orcs. Actually, you could be playing an orc as I got air quotes up, a good guy. I mean, an orc could be a player character. And then, of course, they had dragons. So in 89, the game comes out, it kind of hits with a shock of a hammer. And I remember the following year when we got to see Rifts come out, though it hit in a similar fashion, it didn't seem to hit quite at the same level. The first cover was Larry Elmore, phenomenal fantasy artist. If for people going back to first and second edition D&D, you know the name. If you're a fantasy art person, you know the name. His cover was stunning, absolutely stunning, and I think that alone drew people in. One of the other things for me that I remember from Shadowrun was, to my memory, and I've been going through my head, racking my brain to think if anything else was like this, this feels like kind of the second generation of games to me. So I think we've talked before, you and I, about the generations for game, but first generation was the game style where it basically came from the miniatures. So we had chainmail through the brilliance of a number of people, Dave Arneson, Gary Gygax. It steps over to being what we now call role-playing. That first generation still had a lot of miniature feel. You were drawing out the battle map, which in most cases was the dungeon, and moving around there. That first generation also included Traveler, Call of Cthulhu, which has gone through a number of redos like everyone else, Tunnels and Trolls. There were some funny little games like Creeks and Crawdads. You had the Creeks and Crawdads. What is going to survive after a post-apocalypse?
Okay, I immediately want to play Creeks and Crawdads.
Somewhere around, I have a very dog-eared reprinted copy. I don't even know how many of those were printed. But on and on, all these kind of crazy little games, but they still had a general feel of Dungeons & Dragons where as more stuff was produced, a world was created, but there really wasn't an actual starting world, and there certainly wasn't a running history. Dragonlance, I think, was the first time that I can remember there being a running history for one of the role-playing games. But Shadowrun from day one had that. You read the book, you had this story. This is really kind of the second generation of games to me are the games where you have this massive history that is part of the game and progresses as they go forward. So you had Shadowrun in 89. In 90, you had Rifts. In 91, you had, if I remember correctly, Torg. I know that you had Vampire the Masquerade and all of the World of Darkness stuff coming. And all of that kind of led to the games we're seeing now. On the downside for me, I'm not a fast reader. Those giant tome books are daunting. I'm looking at things like Mutant Year Zero, Aliens, Symborum, a bunch of these games that come out, and it's a 600-page book, which is a step up from, say, Legend of the Five Rings and Call of Cthulhu and some of the other books that recently have been 300-page books. That's a lot of pages for you to kind of swallow and digest and figure to go forward. So that first year it comes out, it does really well, has a number of modules. A couple years later, they come out with a second edition. They do some changes. Second edition, much like for me, the second edition for Gamma World didn't feel like a huge change. It felt like the ability to reskin the book. Third edition was a monster change in the way everything went. And third edition is really where I cut my teeth with the game. So first edition we played a few times, really never had an idea of what to do with it. At that point, really your cyberpunk novels out there were mostly Neuromancer. They're just William Gibson stuff. There just wasn't that much in the genre. By the time third edition had come out, in addition to FOSSA producing a tremendous number of Shadowrun novels, there was a ton of cyberpunk fiction out there for you to be able to start pulling from. I don't even know, what year did Johnny Mnemonic come out? I think the movie Johnny Mnemonic came out before third edition. But third edition for me was the one I decided to finally plunge in and run. And funny thing, the Game Master, and we'll tell you a little more later about the Shadowrun game, but the Game Master that's going to be running for us, Dave, joined my game. That was where I really got to start playing with him for the first time. And he ran probably our most memorable character. He was running basically a big, tough character. He was running an orc named Angram. And Angram because of the way that the system was set up, was pretty much indestructible. One of the scenes I remember, he was fighting with this bat creature multiple stories up, failed an attack roll, fell out a window, got himself tangled up in the drapery blinds, smacked into the side of the building, and then eventually fell down the side of the building, hit the concrete in the bottom, and pretty much walked away from it. It also spawned something that has been in every Shadowrun game for me from that point on, America's Dumbest Shadowrunners. One of the best things that I've enjoyed about the newfangled games is this idea that you tell a story that's ongoing. So it's not episodic. In most cases, like a D&D game, you get together, you go in the dungeon, next time you play, everything's changed. You got different things going on. You know, maybe your character is the same, maybe it's not. In Shadowrun, you kind of have this running storyline, and unless you step out of the timeline and go to another point, things that happen hopefully force you to have things happen in the future that match it. After 3rd edition, we stepped out. I missed most of 4th edition, bought a bunch of the books, but didn't stay with it. The 20th anniversary, which followed it up, I didn't do a whole lot with that. By 5th edition, I felt like they were kind of killing me, and I couldn't keep buying. Every 3 years, there were 16 new books because they would reskin it.
That I remember looking into that too. 5th edition had a ton of content.
Well, but you missed 4th edition, which had a ton of content, and 3rd edition, which had a ton of content, and 20th anniversary.
Did each edition, did they add on to the... Was it continuing like farther into the future? Is it a reskinning?
It is continuation. The reskinning, I said, really is the books. So there's been some form of a street samurai book. That is the characters that tend to be cybered up and combat oriented. There's been a street samurai book in some form through every edition. So if you bought it in 1st, you bought it in 2nd. In that case, it was the same picture. It was literally the same book by name. But you bought it again in 3rd and under a different name, Man and Machine. 4th edition, you bought it again. 20th, you bought it again. 5th, you bought it again. And you've bought it again here in 6th, which is where we are now. And that's what we're going to be playing. Coming up, we're going to be playing 6th edition, the newest edition. This edition's been out for 2 years, approximately 2 years. They have the majority of the important books out. We don't have a rigger book yet. A rigger is the person that tends to drive things, but it doesn't necessarily just mean cars. We've had drone riggers where you're running a bunch of drones doing things. We have security riggers, the people who can get into a building and take over the building systems. But that book is not out yet. I don't know if there is a specific net book or matrix book. I have not seen it, but then I haven't gotten to read a lot of the stuff. So for 6th edition, let's kind of talk about what do we got coming up with this.
Yeah, no, this is really exciting because Dave has been such a great, so running us through his idea, the way he's going to game master, just everything about it. You could tell how much that he loves the world.
Well, so Pedro, rather than just talking about it, why don't we have the man join us himself?
Well, look over here. It's Dave.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Dave.
Hi, everyone.
So for Fireside people, this is Dave. He is running the Shadowrun 6th edition game that we will start playing very soon, August 8th.
Yes.
If you haven't seen the teasers already.
Yeah.
So, Dave, tell us a little bit about your history with Shadowrun and a little bit about what you're doing for the game. We'll ask you more specific questions as we go.
Oh, it's funny that you asked me about my history with Shadowrun, Barry, because actually I started playing Shadowrun with you.
Yep, I had mentioned that.
Yeah, I first started playing Shadowrun when 3rd edition was a fairly fresh game. You were running a game for us that still to this day we talk about, and I've always loved the history and the story that Shadowrun's given its players and game masters.
Absolutely. So I was telling Pedro a little bit before you came in, Angrim was an orc, right? I've not screwed that up?
Yes, he was an orc.
All right, good. Because I was telling Pedro, really, from my game, the most memorable character for me is Angrim, is the character you ran. So hopefully that kind of standout knowledge from the past is going to be the way you're going to run for us in the future, and we're going to stand out as well. So tell us a little bit about what you were thinking about putting the game together. We're coming in. You've played 3rd edition. I don't know. Did you play any of the others? Pedro came in at 5th. I came in at 1st. You came in at third, but did you play fourth, 20th anniversary, fifth?
I played a little bit of fourth and a little bit of fifth, and then really got into the running idea of things when sixth came out.
Okay, so fairly recently, basically like we were talking about the last 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, and then for six, for the game that you're planning on running for us, without giving anything away to us, the players, or the viewers too much, tell us a little bit about what you've got for thoughts. I mean, what are you using? One of the things that I loved about Shadowrun, and still love about Shadowrun, is there is this huge storyline on par with something like Warhammer 40K. I mean, the universe is monstrous. There's well over 35 books out for it, just straight novels. There's a bunch of things that are in its past. How much of the past are you using, and what are you thinking of changing?
Well, I looked at Shadowrun's timeline and tried to incorporate certain elements that have kind of stayed, if you will, traditional to Shadowrun's kind of legacy, and trying within those parameters tell a great story, and at the same time disrupt the timeline and bring something new and fresh to the game. I've taken a big piece of Shadowrun's history in California and changed the very landscape and the environment that the players were going to be playing in, and while also staying true to some of the new elements that the writers have put into the game. So I'm very excited about it.
Well, so California, you're talking about that, and sorry, Pedro, but I know a little bit about California. California is the Cal-free state. What are you changing?
I've taken Cal-free state as being this kind of free zone for people and turned it into a wasteland. And I've had it infect a lot of things that already exist, big things like, the dragon has to be, and some of the things that how magic operates in the zone, and made that fit into the game concept of what the writers currently have in the current Shadowrun timeline. The challenges and the things that have been in place in California for a long time.
So for us, I can tell you, Pedro is our mage, and I haven't seen the magic go awry or strange. Is it something where we're not seeing it, you're already affecting it from behind the scenes, or is this something where we haven't actually felt it yet?
A little bit of both, actually. It's funny that you mentioned that. You guys have seen a little bit about what is going on in-game, and I think it's true in every Shadowrun game, at least in my experience, whether I'm playing it or whether I'm running it, that at some point the players are going to start to connect the dots and bring things together and go, wow, wait a minute, this isn't just something that we've caused. This isn't just a mess that we created. This is something that we're caught in the middle of, or that we're dealing with, or something of that nature, so a bigger picture. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, but on both sides.
Okay, so we've got things coming. Now, you folks have not heard it yet, but Pedro's character has already seen a dragon.
Yes. 2
dragons, not necessarily has to be, but are you envisioning that this is going to affect all dragons? Do we even know?
Well, when it comes to dragons in Shadowrun, obviously it's a big deal and it's a slippery slope. I think anytime there's an emergence or disappearance of a dragon, it's an earth-felt, a global event. So what I've done is I've basically, the same way I've changed the landscape of California, I've also changed the landscape of how dragons react with magic. And that's going to become apparent as we progress through the story.
Okay.
Yeah, we just gotta keep going. We'll find the dragon and it'll be fine.
Well, it's not like we're going to quit.
Yeah.
But so Pedro, as far as dragons go, how much when you were doing Shadowrun, and at least you're reading, how much were you dealing with the dragons? Never deal with the dragon. We all know that one. But how much did you actually learn about them in the game you were playing, or in just your reading?
Honestly, not anything at all.
Okay.
To be honest, I actually really like the idea. So learning more, I've learned more about this than I've ever even considered looking into. Once playing this and kind of having to learn about the world for my character, I like it a lot that the dragons are limited in number and insane in power scaling.
The scope is crazy.
I mean, when you look at D&D, which is where most of my dragon experience is, the dragon, unless you throw a dragon that is clearly above the pay grade of a party. Most people now, I think, are like, oh, a dragon? We should just go kill that.
Right, more
We're just
treasure.
Yeah, I can't tell how many times I've put a dragon in, and it's like, how many times you describe it as this thing is, 10 times your size, it's a red dragon, you've heard about them destroying villages, players just being like, yeah, sure, so let's see, how can we best attack this thing?
Dave, I know you've been playing quite a while in just role-playing in general. Were you around when Dragon issue 50 came out? Does that click with you at all?
I remember reading Dragon Magazine in my early gaming years. My friends had a subscription to it, and I would always go to their house, and they seemed to always have the latest episode on the arm of the couch, and I would always pick it up and go through it. And so I remember a lot of Dragon issues. I'm not quite sure which issue 50
so
was.
50 was a big deal. In the way that Pedro's talking, one of the things that happened in Dungeons & Dragons is dragons became just another cardboard cutout thing to burn. And in issue 50, they took the time to build an entire section. Basically, the centerfold pullout for issue 50 was giving dragon teeth. I don't know if that's the exact name, but that basic idea. And so it took the idea of a standard dragon, which most people forget that they speak. Almost all of them are above average intelligence. I think there is one out of the standard monster manual that is not above average intelligence. They almost all are magic users. I mean, these should be fearsome, once in a lifetime creatures. And this article gave them teeth. Now, jumping forward to Shadowrun, I think they did that to start with. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but if you run into a dragon, and I don't mean run afoul, I mean just run into him in general, that is basically earth-shattering.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Dragons have always been, to Pedro's point, one of these things that I think as players and as characters we look at as an opportunity to become more powerful, but really fail in the perception that, hey, wait a minute, this is way more, we're biting off way more than we can chew here. And Shadowrun's done a good job with dragons being these entities that sculpt, if you will, the landscape of the world, not just physically but economically, in the big picture, right? Especially where the mega corporations, have a presence. And I'll give you as just part of a little teaser. In this game, you will find out what happens when a highly magical creature like a dragon becomes the victim of magic gone awry.
Wow, okay. So something to look forward to and be frightened by.
Yeah, I mean, earth-shattering's been said quite a lot.
Right, well. So, beyond dragons, and they are a big scope in Shadowrun, what other changes? For me, one of the things that I really enjoyed about Shadowrun is they had this odd back world. So, Pedro, I don't know how much you know about this. Dave, you have to know a little bit because I used to talk about it in the game. At the time that Shadowrun came out, they had another game running a couple years later called Earth Dawn. And the idea with Earth Dawn was quiet at first, but later became a major thing. Earth Dawn was the precursor to Shadowrun. I believe Earth Dawn is the end of the second age of magic. I'm not going to, don't cut me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where it is. And Earth Dawn, that world, is what Shadowrun comes out of. And they had a tie-over between them, something that was named the Horrors. This starts coming in 3rd edition through characters that you'll learn if you start reading the fiction characters like Harlequin. We start really learning what's going on with the Horrors. Now, Dave, for the game, do we have Horrors coming? Is that a component of something you're doing at least initially?
Yeah. So I think there's always been this question of, we know in Shadowrun that the magic permeates the astral plane, but what lies beyond it? And what's the connective tissue between the physical world and what's beyond the astral plane? What kind of Pandora's boxes can be opened and what kind of doorways can be stepped through into, maybe sometimes, paradise-like or enjoyable places, but also benevolent and malevolent places with creatures that don't appreciate our presence. And that's something that we're going to see as one of the main points of the overall theme of the game.
Okay, so
Awesome.
So specifically, I'm going to let loose a little bit of the hint. We have the Blight, which is what's going on in Cal Free State. Is there much you can tell us for the background, at least storyline-wise? Are we going to miss anything that you could tell us here that's not going to be in the episodes as far as the background for it?
Yeah, I can tell you that it's always been a question, especially The mega corporations that kind of rule the world of Shadowrun in the current year 2081, how do we merge magic with technology? But what I think they fail to realize is what are the repercussions of merging magic with technology, delving too deep, getting too greedy. That's what I refer to when I say opening Pandora's box or stepping through doorways that maybe weren't meant to be stepped through. What's on the other side? What are we going to let in that we didn't mean to, outside of just sheer progress?
Okay. Well, it sounds kind of frightening, Pedro.
Just because we can, maybe we shouldn't.
Well,
That's
that's never
not-
stopped a single
Yeah,
gamer
that's
ever,
never-
Yeah.
right?
Never.
Okay. So one of the things that I did when I was running 3rd edition when you were there, and Pedro, I wish you had been there because I think you would have loved it.
Probably.
I
I think that's pretty probably, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did is I tried to get the group globe trotting. Now, one of the nice things with the group that we have put together, the voices that we put together for your game, Dave, is other than myself, basically nobody really knows the history of the megacores. The dirty history, if we will, what's the background for Az Technology or Seder Krupp. So if you were to throw us on a mission and say Az Technology wants you to do this, chances are the characters wouldn't balk at it. In my game, when I was running back with 3rd edition, all the players knew. So I would set up adventures where I'd say, so you guys get approached by blah, 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 and Az Technology is in the back of it, and you would be like, yep, unequivocally, we're not doing that. Now, for our game, we went to Amazonia, we went to Germany. I tried to get you to go to Mexico as technology. I didn't succeed in it. Do you envision for the longer portion of the game that we're going to leave the western portion of what was the United States?
That's a great question. My thoughts for the story were to try and step beyond the boundaries of geographical, Earth mass. When you talk about globetrotting, going from the United States or the UCAS or Seattle into other areas, Amazonia, Azania, different things, Germany, if you will. And there's all these great products that have been written for that. I want to take it a step further. I want to go from where we're at and what we're familiar with here, California, and the west coast of what used to be the United States, into way farther regions. I want to permeate the astral. I want to permeate different planes of existence and tie them together in the current storyline and current timeline of what Shadowrun's providing as a game.
Oh, wow. So we're not just talking globe trotting, but plane stepping. Or dimension hopping? I'm not sure what word to use. We're going to be coining it here, so...
I really hope we survive.
Yeah, well, there's that, too.
Yeah.
So as far as the characters that we've brought for you, Dave, are you feeling that we're missing anything? I mean, is there a character type that we don't have represented that would have been a benefit? I'll tell the listeners that we do have one character, LT, who's going to be joining us, who is not run by a player, so he is an NPC or non-player character, and he needed to fill a role that really none of us could do. But do you envision that there's something else we're going to need in the future, or are we going to be able to fly by the seat of our pants through everything?
I think the group is well-rounded. Everyone's got, I think, a very defined role across the board with the characters that everyone created. I think what's going to happen is it's going to fall specifically on each individual at some point in order to move the group forward. So I'm looking forward to that. But you guys represent, a full spectrum of what's available in Shadowrun. You've got your muscle, you've got your magical capabilities, you've got your scientific background and covert ops, skill sets. So, and you've got your social aspects, to say the least, with Jelly. So,
all right,
you've got the full spectrum covered.
And if you have checked out the teaser or the character intros we
right by this
by
point,
now,
you should have had a couple of the character intros.
Yeah, you'll kind of get to see a couple of them, and then you'll see a few more in the next few days, and kind of see what you have coming to you.
Absolutely. Well, so Dave, before we cut off, I want to give you the chance, without any questions thrown on you, anything you want to tell our listeners about what's coming up for Shadowrun.
What's coming for Shadowrun is I'm going to introduce some new concepts that I don't think have previously been exposed in Shadowrun in the gameplay, not mechanic-wise, but just storytelling-wise. And I think overall, with the group that we have and the story that I'm writing, I think it's a great opportunity for us to tell a great story that we talk about like we did in your game. We still to this day talk about the York, Angram, and some of the places that we went like we played them just a week ago. That is my vision for the game. That's my goal.
And it's a frightening thought because you and I were just talking about that recently. It's been over 20 years since we played Angram, and we still remember that group. So, well, good. Pedro, anything more that I've missed?
I'm just wondering if we're going to meet Ingram in our game.
You never know.
You never know. I get it. I like that. Well, Dave, thanks so much for joining us for the Fireside Chat.
Thank you for having me.
Dave.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for running.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
I can't wait for people to get to hear it.
Oh yeah, this is gonna. All of our stuff is good stuff. This is a really good one.
This is a step above, I think, at least as far as what we've done. So, Pedro, I'm going to be tuning in August 8th on Sunday to listen to the first episode of Sunday in the Shadows. How about you?
Yeah, even though I was there, I really want to hear it again.
Absolutely. Well, from both of us, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Dave, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another NCRP Productions podcast. To stay on top of everything we're doing, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and like us on Facebook, all at NCRP Productions. You can show your support and help us continue to produce content by joining our Patreon. We offer additional podcasts like our B-Sides and have GM materials, maps, and other fun things you can discover over time. You can find our podcasts on YouTube, Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, and many other fine podcast sites. Just look for us at NCRP Productions. We value your thoughts, so please don't hesitate to leave us feedback or comments. And if you would like to contact us directly, you can email us at ncrpproductions@gmail.com.